Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hello, my name is Annie Rogers, and on behalf of the Attitude team, I'm so pleased to welcome you to today's ADHD Experts presentation celebrating ADHD Awareness Month. It's titled Combating Stereotypes About Women, Men, and Children with ADHD. I don't need to tell you that few conditions in medicine and psychology suffer from more caricature, stereotype, flat out lies, or disinformation than ADHD. Those diagnosed with ADHD run into these stereotypes daily. Friends, family, coworkers, even some clinicians and educators perpetuate these stereotypes with inaccurate facts and misguided opinions. I guess if they're inaccurate, they're not facts, right? It's our job to know the facts about ADHD and to push back when confronted with these myths and misinformation and false narratives. So that is what we are doing here today and all month long in ADHD Awareness Month. So in today's webinar, we are going to spend some time really engaging in a dialogue about the most common stereotypes that face both children and adults, men and women with ADHD, and that hamper understanding of the condition. We'll be talking about some strategies for those feelings of shame or guilt that many people report when they do encounter these inaccurate statements, and also how to communicate with friends and family and others about ADHD. So leading this whole discussion, we are so fortunate today to have with us Edward Hallowell, MD, and Sari Solden, MS. Ned Hallowell is a child and adult psychiatrist. He is one of the leading authorities in the field of ADHD, the host of Dr. Hallowell's Wonderful World of Different, a weekly podcast for thriving in this crazy busy world. He's also a world-renowned speaker and the founder of the Hallowell Centers in Boston, Metro West, New York City, San Francisco, Seattle. He's written 20 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Driven to Distraction, and also Driven to Distraction at Work, Delivered from Distraction, Because I Come from a Crazy Family, and most recently, ADHD 2.0. Learn more about him at drhallowell.com and know that he does not have any financial affiliations impacting today's presentation. Sari Solden is a psychotherapist who has counseled adults with ADHD for more than 30 years. She's the author of the books Women with Attention Deficit Disorder, Journeys Through ADD Adulthood, and co-author of A Radical Guide for Women with ADHD. Her areas of specialization include women's issues, inattentive ADHD, and the emotional consequences and healing process for adults who grew up with undiagnosed ADHD. She's a prominent keynote speaker on these subjects nationally and internationally. She consults with leading groups for neurodiverse women and mental health. She helps professionals and trains therapists in how to help women with ADHD. She also serves on the professional advisory board of ADA and was the recipient of their award for outstanding service by a helping professional. So as you can tell, we are in good hands today. So before I officially hand over the microphone and we kick off here, I have just a few housekeeping items, which I will keep brief. If you are tuned into our live webinar, welcome. You can download the slides by clicking in the event resources section of the webinar screen. But please know that today's conversation is going to be really more of a conversation. We're not going to follow slides in the way that we might in other webinars, and that's on purpose. So do not be concerned if you don't see what you normally do in an Attitude webinar. We will offer a certificate of attendance option. So look for that, look for instructions for that just as soon as we wrap up the live broadcast in about an hour. And if you are listening in replay or podcast mode, please visit attitudemag.com and search podcast 375 to access the slides, the webinar replay, and the certificate of attendance. If you support the work we're doing here at Attitude, we encourage you to visit attitudemag.com/subscribe and sign up for Attitude Magazine for your family or to share with a teacher or a loved one who could benefit from greater ADHD understanding. Finally, the sponsor of this week's webinar is Inflow. Inflow is the #1 app to help you manage your ADHD. Developed by leading clinicians, Inflow is a science-based self-help program based on the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy. Download now on the App Store or Google Play Store. Attitude thanks our sponsors for supporting our webinars. Sponsorship has no influence on speaker selection or webinar content. So without any further ado, I am incredibly pleased and honored to welcome Dr. Hallowell and Sari Solden on this topic of greater ADHD awareness. Thank you so much for being with us today. Oh, and we can kick off the conversation.
Okay, good. I thought I was supposed to wait. Well, thank you so much, Attitude Magazine, WebMD, Wayne, Annie, and Natalie for your invitation and your flexibility with us. You know, I asked Ned 10 times if I could start today, and he said yes, because I really wanted to thank Ned publicly. Also, I was going through boxes the other day, as many women with ADHD do from time to time, and I saw all these letters and notes from you from really early on of great support over the years, and I want to thank you. I also wanted to say that helped me see, apropos to the subject today, that it's not enough just to challenge negativity, but we have to also, on the other side, develop positive people in our life, people who can see us and value us and help us develop an internal sense of that for ourselves, because we can learn all sorts of strategies and communication strategies, which we will do. But as a therapist, I'm sure you'll agree, it takes longer and is more important actually to develop this valuing internal voice that we've developed from all these pathologizing messages and wounds of differences over these years. So just wanted to thank you for that. And I think Ned and I, you'll see, have different styles, different types of ADHD that manifest, different genders, obviously. We'll tell a funny story about how that influences us. But basically, I think right from the start, we share this non-pathologizing view, this very humanistic whole view of human beings. And, you know, we've had tons of clinical experience between us. So, you know, we know from what we speak as well as from our own personal experiences. So, the funny story is, briefly, and you can add to it, that we both wanted the same thing. Just from ADD perspective, we both wanted to be engaged and have a conversation. And I thought I was really pushing the boundaries, which was funny, you know, because I was saying, well, maybe you could make us a little bigger, make the slides a little smaller, blah, blah, blah. And then I was negotiating and following the rules. And Ned came on and joined us. He said, no slides. No, we're not doing slides. And then, okay, I just cracked up because I thought that was such a great, you know, demonstration of how women's gender influences even how they behave with making their lives work with ADHD, the rule following. So today there's no script, no net, it's unscripted conversation between the two of us about some of the topics that Annie introduced. So Ned, you want to start off by telling us if you hate the name ADHD as much as I do? And now we can start with that topic.
Sure. Well, I also want to say what a joy it is to be with you, Sari. You know, we go back, way back to, I think we met at that conference in Michigan, was it?
93.
93. Wow. So, you know, we've been seeing this field grow and our relationship deepen over decades, literally decades. And that's the way it is in the field. You know, there's a bunch of us who've kind of been ushering it along and plowing the fields, and it's great to see the progress we've made. And you know, and I think of you as a compatriot, you know, and of course my buddy John Rady, and you know, we all have Russell Barkley to thank, and the many people who have you know, from the folks at Mass General to Peter Jensen to and the people who laid the groundwork before them, Hans Hussey and Paul Wender and Leopold Belloc, people who have passed away who were talking about this condition when no one had heard of it in adults. And so, it's good to have a historical perspective, but also a collegial, joy. One of the joys is that I get to unite with people like you, Sari, and not people like you, and because there is no one like you, and
ditto,
and celebrate the progress we've made, and I think, and today's topic, misunderstanding, stereotype, caricature, all of that, we've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go, and the name itself begets misunderstanding, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I have the condition myself, and I can promise you I don't suffer from a deficit of attention. What we suffer from, if you want to call it suffer, is an abundance of attention. We have an abundance of attention. Our challenge is to control it, and that's why I came up with the analogy of a Ferrari engine brain with bicycle brakes. We have tremendous power, incredible imagination, but to control it, that's the challenge. So it's not a deficit at all. And I don't see it as a disorder. I know Russ Barkley takes issue with me here because I certainly acknowledge it can be a terrible affliction. It can be a disorder. But I think to call it entirely a disorder leaves out the positive. And there is so much positive that usually comes with this condition. So I prefer to see it as a trait. And now Russ says, don't say that because nobody's going to fund research into a trait. And so from a practical standpoint, there are advantages to calling it a disorder, and it can indeed ruin your life. So there's no doubt that it can be a disorder. But I think what that misses and really promotes a negative stereotype are the positives that go with it. So just to say, John Rady and I proposed a term to, instead of ADHD, which is inaccurate and misleading and utterly pathologizing, instead to call it VAST, variable attention stimulus trait. And that zeroes in on the two key variables, attention and stimulation, because, we're stimulus junkies. We boredom is our kryptonite. We have to have stimulation to be mentally there. And so variable attention stimulus trait is a far more accurate and certainly less pathologizing term than ADHD. So, So I'll turn it back to you now, Sari.
I know. I'll try not to interrupt. I know. Well, I think it is a tricky balance. It went from the characterological all those years, through history to, the medicalization of it to get it taken seriously and get it, insurance to cover it and get it taken seriously. But, then we've gone way too far and, we need to move back to the human who has these challenges and to see people as very complex. The term, I don't even like to say ADHD anymore because it's very limiting. It's not accurate. I most of the time now talk about neurodiversity, and because we're all different, and that's much more accepting. Neurodiversity, or I talk about women with executive function challenges, because that's what actually causes their difficulties and their shame is the intersection of those two things. So, I just think it's more helpful, less pathologizing, and less hurtful, and more helpful than to not use that term. It's lost all its meaning in the media. Between the media and people, it's become a sort of a easy kind of put down. Means nothing anymore. It means everybody has it or nobody has it, and so I just think it's lost its usefulness. It's truly biochemical. Last night I couldn't string two words together. Literally, and today, the dopamine started kicking in, and I can talk again. So I know that it's biochemical, and we have to get to a place that's just a description of our brain. And most of the problems, and even with mental health professionals and all these things we're talking about, is because we don't treat people in a humanizing way. So I believe a lot of those things come from not being diagnosed, but even when you are diagnosed, being treated in this limiting, very narrow, too broad or too narrow a brush stroke about people. So I think that's where, from the clients I see, if you're just dealing with ADHD at the end of the day, you're okay. It's like all that other shame and guilt and all the stuff that comes from the media and social media now is for women, especially how they compare themselves in very toxic ways. So I don't think we'll be calling it ADHD or attention deficit disorder very much longer, I hope, because I don't like to talk about that. I like to have a broader view of a complex human being. We all have challenges and strengths, and we, more importantly, all have core traits that define us much more than either of these.
Yeah, I gave a talk a couple of years ago at my old high school that I graduated from in 1968, Exeter prep school up in New Hampshire. I gave a talk to the student body, and when it was over, the principal of the school came up to me and he said, Ned, you came perilously close to making it sound as if people should want to have this condition. And I said, gee, perilously close. That's exactly what I was hoping to say. And he thought, oh, that's a terrible thing, because this is a disorder after all. We don't want our students to have a disorder. And you see, the upside is just the qualities that you can't buy and you can't teach: curiosity, creativity, originality, the ability to take chances, an entrepreneurial drift. This country was built and is continued to be built by people who have this trait. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs. There's, the guy who invented the PCR test that we used for COVID and
Right.
we used for all the forensic and all that, the polymerase chain reaction. Kary Mullis won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for that, and he's since passed away. But he had big time ADD. He was.
Oh, it just has to be channeled, like you said. It has to be channeled, and so otherwise it becomes chaos. But if you get the right support and the right view of yourself, and you feel entitled, women often don't feel entitled to have a voice, to move ahead, to do anything that can be, how they want to contribute, while they still have this piles and this stuff and this disorganization. Like you said once, you only have to be good and well enough organized, but women wait until it's, their life is practically over to give themselves a chance to, get the support they need and walk alongside these difficulties. I have piles and boxes all over here, but if I waited, I would never be doing any of the stuff I did,
So let me ask you a question. The biggest undiagnosed group we'll call it ADHD because that's what it's known as, are adult women. Why is that? Why is it the stereotype? Is it failure of public education, failure to educate professionals? What most women, if they go for help, I'd venture to say 95% will come away with a diagnosis of anxiety and depression.
Exactly.
And they'll be put on SSRIs, which is not what they need. So why is this, Sari?
Well, and that's why the stereotype, as we're talking about today, is so harmful, because not just it makes us feel bad, but it delays diagnosis for women, people who are inattentive. Women often don't get diagnosed because they don't meet the stereotype of the hyperactive, impulsive, kind of acting out little boy. And then if they're smart on top of it, and, about the myth that you can't be smart or educated, there's, people don't pay attention to it until they're depressed. And then they go, and inattentive ADHD looks like depression too. So it's even harder after a while. And women are smart and they compensate. And so they are over organizing, over preparing, and internalizing their difficulties. And so it's very hard for anybody to see this until too late. So that's why they have so many years to develop the shame and the withdrawal from the world and withdrawal from other women and the hiding. The biggest compensation women say they use really is hiding. They don't take the risk to be known and to have a voice. And so there's so many harmful elements that come, not just in controlling or helping your ADD, but to yourself, your sense of self, by these stereotypes. That's why it's important. Now, I have to say, since the pandemic, I've talked to women worldwide, and it seems like many more young women are getting diagnosed. And, there is some kind of revolution going on, and they accept themselves more. But for most of these years, women, were just seen as hysterical or oversensitive or another excuse, or, seen as selfish or lazy or stuck up, or, so there's so much pathologizing by not understanding that this could be something that women are struggling with.
So fill out the picture a little for us. Let's say you're a woman out there listening and you think you might have this. What's the good news? What can come from proper diagnosis and treatment?
So much, look at me. I mean, it's true. I didn't say a word until I was like 40 or something. So then it was like awakening. So if you get on the right medication, which is just a little stimulant often for women, and it's necessary often, but not sufficient, but it can start the whole cycle of you being able to get help to move ahead, to decide what you want to do, to focus your attention. In Radical Guide, our new book with Dr. Frank, we talk about combating that, not just to get over your ADHD and to focus on your challenges, but to shine, to move into the center of your life, to let people see you, to develop a new narrative about yourself. So we talk about just taking small steps toward the edge of your comfort zone, to get with people who can see you and value you, and that you don't have to forfeit your right to have a voice and a place in the world, which many women feel. Get a good mental health professional. You don't want someone who's just focusing on getting fixed, getting over your problems, so that you can feel good about yourself. You have to feel good about yourself with executive function problems. I mean, that's, I think, a big a split in the profession. Some people, I've heard psychologists say, well, no, you have to get over these problems so you can feel good about yourself. Well, that's not true. You have to be able to walk alongside these challenges and make your life work. This is chronic. It's something you have to learn to, live with, but it's not defining you. You can't measure your worth by it or your life.
Absolutely. So
yeah.
You mean you were in hiding until you were 40 years old?
I didn't say a word.
Wow.
They used to tease me in group therapy. I'd go to these group sessions, at work. They said, were you at group today? I was very shy. I didn't talk. I didn't want to take the risk of saying the wrong thing, until I got diagnosed and read your book, read Kate and Peggy's book. I didn't know what was going on because I was smart and educated and successful, but I was so hard to put two sentences together. And to risk, saying the wrong thing. I had all the same things that and so embarrassed about my, clutter and my difficulties organizing because I had no idea what was going on.
So you really experienced the wonderful, dramatic, positive turnaround that people don't realize. This is very real. I mean, we see it in our offices all the time. It's right there, a whole new life. And, that sounds like hokum, but it's the truth.
It happened to me. Yeah. And especially without an explanation, women go through these years of not knowing. So you develop I have journals filled. What's wrong with me? Do I have, what's wrong with me? I had no idea because I didn't know that you could be smart and successful and, inattentive, and I couldn't even stay awake. So I didn't know you could do all that and that it meant something. And then it wasn't until the early 90s where you guys started writing these books that I said, oh, maybe that's what's the cause of my disorganization.
And then you took off. I mean, you started.
I did right
writing
away
about it yourself, and these wonderful books that you've created.
Yeah, I started talking at work right away and giving workshops right away. But I mean, that doesn't happen to everybody. I don't want to, put up that false narrative, but sometimes it takes longer to find the right medication or the right dose or the right combination. And but for me, it helped me, my brain right away wake up.
Yeah. That's and that's why it's so important that people understand. The stereotype is so misleading of the hyperactive little boy. Sure, they do exist, but there you were, a real smart. That's another misconception, that you have to be stupid to have this. Real smart, doing well, but constricted and hiding, avoiding showing the world you're spreading your wings and flying. And that's where diagnosis can absolutely unleash a whole new you. And that's not a slogan, that's the truth.
That's true. But therapy too. I mean, I think that we don't understand. I work a lot with mental health professionals and helping them not understand this is like not a cancer to be excised, like a symptom to get over, as a measure of how you're doing in treatment. That's not, for me, with women. These are very deep, complex, long acting, it takes a long time to work on these issues of a new narrative and seeing yourself. You have to connect up with other people who also have the same strengths and not just the same challenges, but some people who you can see clearly reflect what you're dealing with. And let's talk about some of these communication strategies, because that also, I believe, for my women, it starts from within. You can have lots of techniques, but if you don't believe that you're valuable or that in a relationship or with other people, you're not, it's going to be very hard for you. And what have you seen about what works when you're confronted with these stereotypes or negativity?
Well, I think the biggest way to gain confidence is to make progress at some activity that matters to you and is challenging. That combination, it's got to matter to you and be challenging. And, in my new book, I call it Your Right Difficult, the thing that's...
I love that. I love that. It's so true. I read it.
Find your right difficult, and then do whatever it takes to make progress. Get a coach, get the right medication, have someone encouraging you. We really do thrive with encouragement, and we wilt without it. So you want to be sure you've got your own cheerleading section behind you. And then, for me, my right difficult is writing. And, I really discovered it in 12th grade when my English teacher got me to write a novel. And he was my cheerleader. So, and I've been writing ever since. Once you unleash the out of the bottle, it's been carrying me ever since. Trying to, and it's a blessing and a curse. Writing, nothing's harder than writing, but for some reason I love it. It's the way some people love golf, another punishing discipline. But
right.
I think that's if you can find your right difficult. I think it's part of the developing of ADHD that's been overlooked. We really need a creative outlet, just as much as a cow needs to be milked. We need to deliver ourselves on a daily basis, really, of our creative juices. So I urge you to find your right difficult. Women and men alike. Yeah.
I agree, because otherwise your brain just goes silent, and you need something to be stimulating and focusing it. Often, sometimes what you want to do is also difficult organizationally. So that's why sometimes adding a coach or a support person or assistant is very important to help you stay on that path. But
I just want to underline what you said about the disorganization too, because you're so right. We're never going to be Martha Stewart. We're never going to be.
We share a birthday.
We're never going to be the organized. But what you want to do is get well enough organized so that disorganization doesn't prevent you from reaching your goals. And that's a far cry from being perfectly organized. And then also not to be ashamed of your disorganization. I'm very happy, to have mess piles, and I know I'll clean them up from time to time and they don't get in my way, but I don't envy the person who has nothing on his desk and everything is in its place. I say, good, that's his style and it's not mine, and I kind of like my comfortable messes,
I show a picture of my speeches sometimes about Einstein's desk on the day he died. It was a disaster. Should he have waited? I mean, that is one of the important distinctions that you make. I just want to point it out for the women listening, that that's what women are different than men about how they feel about being disorganized. For them, the executive function difficulties, their roles as mothers and managers of the household, even in 2021, is astonishing, like 1950 still. They've internalized these ideals about what it means to be, at the helm of that, and organization and being orderly and helping everybody with their logistics. They define themselves by that a lot. And that's what causes the shame, the guilt, and withdrawal. Is the organization for women. And that's why I started writing my book, when I saw that was the difference. Women take that into their identity very deeply, and they internalize and toxically compare themselves. So that's a big issue in therapy for women, is to work on that and to have different models.
Yes. And different standards. And another standard that I often balk at in mental health, people talk a lot about the importance of loving yourself. And I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people who love themselves who really shouldn't, and so I don't hold that out. I think the more realistic goal is to like yourself enough that you can be real, that you don't have to pretend to be someone else. You don't have to pretend to be neater. You don't have to pretend to be thinner. You don't have to pretend to be smarter. You can be who you are And then when you can do that, then other people get permission to do the same. And the next thing you know, you've hit pay dirt, which is connection. Genuine connection is what makes life worth living. And disconnection, which is the state so many people with undiagnosed ADHD live in, makes life pretty miserable. So don't feel if you're out there and you don't love yourself, that's okay. Just get enough for people around you that you feel permission to be real, that you like yourself enough that you don't have to fake it. And then what happens is
people take their cues from you, like you're saying. And in our book, we talk about that authenticity, like monitoring you. Sometimes when you go like get anxious or with other people, if you monitor, you'll see it's what you're doing is not being authentic. You're pretending, you're holding back. And when you can be authentic and be yourself, I mean, I agree 100%. But that takes a lot of support from other people, or at least one other person who can help you see that that's okay to be yourself, because women want to be known and want to be seen, but they're so scared of that because they're afraid, again, of that pathologizing message. But just in terms of communication, I'll finish this off right now. I wrote a blog about this. People can look up like healthy communication for neurodiverse women. I think it's on my ADHDradicalguide.com blog. It's very hard to hold on to that truth about yourself. And when you're having negative experience, negative attributions coming at you. And it's okay just to practice, to go slowly, to practice holding on to your own truth about yourself and your own brain and what you know to be true about yourself. You don't have to like be the most perfectly assertive person at first, but just to go slowly and to develop a narrative within yourself that you know who you are and you know how, your own value, and just slowly start to not silence yourself in the face of some negative attributions coming your way. It's scary and it takes a long time. I just want to slow down people's expectations about that. All the stuff we're talking about, you need to have a good therapist or a good coach or a good friend or a good group, somebody to help you see yourself and slowly move ahead and pushing back. And when you're facing resistance or negativity.
Yeah. And give other people a chance to like you. I think we can push that away sometimes out of modesty, or we feel embarrassed with positive, feedback. But people like it when you accept positive feedback. If you can let yourself be nourished by other people's kind regard, and not disown it, not say, oh, that's not me, or, oh, someone else did it. I mean, that's true. Like in group therapy, I remember years ago, we have to stop, instead of getting confronted with negatives, I had to make people stop and hear positive things that people were saying to them. And then they can develop like a scaffold inside where they have some shelves to put some of these more positive things on. Because if you have this negative narrative, that's all you'll collect. You have to somehow start to accept what you're saying, these positive things people see about you, because they're often invisible along with the challenges. These other traits you have, they're invisible also often to you. Right. It's well, we both believe passionately in trying to help people discover this condition and run with it in such a way that they grow like you've done and like we see people do every day. What is there any message that you'd want to leave? I think one is, don't believe the stereotypes. The stereotypes don't get it right. That you can be, in fact, a real smart person and have this condition. Really the hallmark of it is unexplained underachievement. You could be doing better, and you can't quite figure out why. And before you say it's depression or anxiety, think, what about this thing called ADD, and then find out what it really is, not what the stereotype is. What it really is basically a mind that has a mind of its own. It just goes wherever curiosity leads it. So you're forever being led off track, and the goal is not to wipe that out, but to give you more control over where your mind goes. Right.
And my takeaway message for women, especially, is to not define yourself by these challenges. Not let it define who you are or measure your worth about it. But not underestimate those difficulties, but not underestimate your strengths too. and to realize that who you are inside is much more important than any of those things. I have my client the other day doing a thought experiment. Instead of like feeling bad all the times when she's confronted with neurotypicals at work, internally to say, oh, those poor people, they're so limited. They don't really think very creatively. And even internally to start looking at people instead of, oh, I'm so different, to start thinking, well, they're pretty limited. They don't have as many ideas or creativity as I do. So sometimes it's like an internal kind of joke with yourself.
Yeah, I say they're the folks who have attention surplus disorder.
Yeah,
they never have new ideas. They never go outside the lines. And the world needs both. We do need the people who can make the trains run on time. And
Definitely.
then we need people like us who, think of another way than taking a train,
Right. You need neurotypical allies, I say. Just like any diversity issue, you need allies who can help you. Both of you are, nobody's better than anybody else. Everybody's just different. And I think that's why I like the term neurodiversity. It's non-blame. It explains everybody's differences. So
right.
How about if we take some questions now?
Okie dokie.
Yes, I'm looking at the time. I'm a rule keeper. I'm watching the time.
Good for you.
Keeping this train running on time. I love it.
Good for you. Yeah.
Well, we do have a fair number of questions, and I wanted to start out just reiterating, because this really rang true for me. Sarah, you said that the key is to learn to walk alongside these challenges and not to measure your worth by them. I just found that so powerful. And we have a lot of women listening today. And one of the, I don't want to call it a stereotype, because it's actually true. One of the things we hear a lot is that women are not diagnosed in their younger years, for myriad reasons that we can get into. And we have several women listening today who are in their 40s, who are have children who have been diagnosed or not, who are seeking a diagnosis, and they are running into all kinds of roadblocks. One that really makes me incredibly angry here. She said that her psychologist agrees she likely has ADHD, but was very dismissive of me bothering to be formally diagnosed. He seemed to think that she didn't need a diagnosis or medication because she was functioning well enough. Can you speak to that?
Well enough for who? He went on to become a psychiatrist, well enough. That is very dismissive and condescending. Get another psychiatrist, obviously. But, to be diagnosed is important just so you know who to identify with, how to understand your experience. And like I said before, having the right medication instead of the wrong medication can give you the kind of fuel, the boost you need to go on to be as successful as you want to be, not as limited as he wants you to be. So, Ned, do you have anything to say about that? You're a psychiatrist.
Yeah, no. It's silly to tell people you shouldn't want to do better. You're doing fine, and that happens all the time. People don't get diagnosed because they're not failing. Well, you don't have to. I have a self-made billionaire in my New York practice, and he said, "Think what I could have done had I had this diagnosis sooner." I said, "You're not doing too badly, but the point is, he knew he could be doing much better, and once he got onto the right medication and understood the diagnosis, he did in fact do. And it's not just do better with less effort. He didn't have to put as much effort in. Undiagnosed ADD is like driving on square wheels. You may get there, but it takes a tremendous amount of effort. Clunk, clunk, clunk. And what the meds do and the insight, the coaching, all of that does is it rounds out your wheels. So you get a lot more distance on a lot less effort. And, for someone to say, well, you shouldn't want that. Well, they don't know what it's like. It's a shame that there's so much in the professional community, so much ignorance and really brings some people to a point where they just don't get the help because the professional they consult doesn't know enough to be able to provide it. So don't take no for an answer. Go find someone who really does understand this condition.
But I mean, I think that's so important what you're saying. And, it's such an important point that you can't judge by the product somebody creates. I was doing great. Everything I did looked great, but we're talking about the internal process. Like Ned said, the depletion women go through, the hard work, the hardest working lazy people, I've ever met. So the amount of energy that goes into whatever that is that he thinks is okay enough is something that he's missing. So you want the medication to make it easier to be yourself, easier to do these things more consistently, not just to produce something more, but to feel better. It's difficult to live with ADHD often internally. So we're talking about the strengths, but there's a lot of distress and stress and difficulty with living with unmedicated or undiagnosed ADHD.
Oh, it can be hell on wheels. I mean, it can be literally a living hell. And I think we don't want to minimize that because right. you and I try to stress the positive, but the negative is horrible. And, Russ Barkley has estimated that it takes an average of 15 years off your life because of all the morbidities that go along with the condition. So that's worse than cigarette smoking. So, so this is very high stakes poker. And not getting the diagnosis can be absolutely devastating. And so while Sari and I like to promote the great places the diagnosis and treatment can take you to, don't want to overlook the disaster that not getting help can end you up in.
Exactly. And I think you have to, when you go to a mental health professional, you have to make sure that's validated and understood in its complexity of what getting through everyday life is like when you have ADHD, someone who understands that as well as sees you whole. But, we want to really emphasize both those parts.
Okay. That is, yes, so important. And as much as we have many, many adults who are new to the diagnosis, we also have some parents listening today. And one of them who is recognizing possible symptoms of ADHD and feels apprehension about the diagnosis, going through the evaluation process, the labels, all of that, and wondering if their child is, as they said, sort of doing it, not struggling, quote unquote. Should they pursue an evaluation?
Yeah, you don't have to be struggling, in order to benefit from a diagnosis. Usually, you don't go for help unless you are struggling. So, but ideally, if you have the symptom profile, then you should go get the help because, life can only get better. I mean, I say I call this a good news diagnosis because once you get the diagnosis, your life can only get better. It's just a matter of how much. Sometimes a lot better, and sometimes just a little bit. But you don't want to say, well, you don't need to get the diagnosis because you're not doing badly enough or you're not struggling enough.
And who's to say how someone's struggling inside? A child, especially a girl, often internalizes the anxiety or the depression. You don't know how someone's compensating for it, trying to be a good girl or trying to hide how they're feeling. So you don't know how a kid is struggling internally. You can just see maybe they're doing okay. Maybe they're smart and they're doing okay in school. That doesn't mean they're not struggling internally either.
That's an excellent point. And you both have brought up several of the, related or comorbid conditions that kind of walk hand in hand with ADHD. And the fact that ADHD symptoms, we're learning more and more, change with age, fluctuate pretty significantly. So there are some people here wondering, will ADHD symptoms ever go away in their child? Or also, I should say, people who are perhaps in their 50s and 60s who are wondering whether they should bother with a diagnosis.
Oh,
yeah. With the diagnosis.
My oldest patient was 86, and he finally was able to write the book he'd wanted to write his whole life long. So it's absolutely you're never too old to benefit from a diagnosis and treatment. Never, never, never too old. surely that's exceptional, 86, but any age, the diagnosis and treatment can help. As for getting better, a lot of times what happens is what happened to me. I learned to compensate so well that it looks as if, to a casual observer, I don't have it. But believe me, ask my wife, and she'll say, "Oh, yes, he has it." But a lot of us learn to compensate, even sometimes to the point of having OCD like symptoms. We're sort of maniacally well organized because we know we're teetering on the precipice of chaos all the time. We can learn how to compensate very well and do very well, but internally we still are wrestling with these convergent forces every day.
Yeah, and that also prevents women from getting diagnosed because they're so well compensated. They're smart, they're successful, they're so well compensated, they're completely over-organized, to the exclusion of doing anything else other than staying organized. And so that even or they're self-medicating makes it very hard even to get diagnosed. So that's something else people should be aware of. And my oldest client was 85, and when she got she came when she was 80, and she said when she was 85, it was the best 5 years of her life, right before she died. So that was lovely too.
That's funny. And, you mentioned self-medication. We should add that a lot of the addicted or near addicted population has undiagnosed ADD, and they're self-medicating. And it's, again, if you could treat the ADD, then they're able to give up their substance, so by when they get the right medication, they're able to give up the abusing or overusing the wrong medication. It's an important point that a lot of people are not aware of.
Right. And and then also for women, sometimes when you're trying to diagnose them, or they're saying everything's fine, and you ask them how much Diet Coke they're drinking or how much caffeine they're drinking, like, whoa, it's way off the charts. So sometimes you don't even realize how much you're, self-medicating in those kind of ways too, or with food or other ways, that help you focus or reduce your anxiety.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of healthy and unhealthy, perhaps, coping mechanisms out there. I wanted to share this question because I feel like it's one that we do hear a lot in variations, and it's so tricky and so important. I'm a woman in my 40s. I was diagnosed with depression as a kid, and then anxiety as an adult. My son was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and now I'm wondering if my diagnosis was really a comorbidity of ADHD. However, I'm high achieving. I'm not sure what to do. How do I know if it's depression or ADHD? Maybe both.
Well, what often happens, and what to do is to see a professional who actually knows what the condition is. Very often, depression, or what looks like depression, occurs in the wake of the untreated ADD. So the untreated ADD leaves you underachieving, which is depressing, underachieving and frustrating. And you're always wondering what's going to go wrong next. So you've got what looks like an anxiety disorder. So you present to the naive professional or the inexperienced professional, and sure, you've got symptoms of depression and anxiety, but that's not the driving force. The driving force is the undiagnosed ADD causing frustration, underachievement, and anxiety. And when you treat the ADD, let's say with stimulant medication, your level of your performance goes up, hence what had looked like depression goes away and gets supplanted with joy, and you feel more in control. So what had looked like an anxiety disorder disappears as well, and you become cool as a cucumber. So it's one of those instances where the right diagnosis and then the right medication can make a huge difference, and the wrong can absolutely leave you stymied and not where you need to be. To treat the depression with an SSRI is just not going to give you the kind of results you need to get.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. It happens to women all the time where the primary diagnosis is missed or misdiagnosed as something else. And then, that takes years sometimes to go back and revisit that. So, 100%, I see that happening all the time for women.
This is, I think, a tricky one, but it's being repeated here. So many people who are seeing that pursuing an evaluation makes sense for them, and they're having a heck of a time finding clinicians who really understand adult ADHD, and particularly that in women. Can you offer any guidance for how they can go about finding a really experienced practitioner?
Well, I'll let you speak in a sec, Sari, but I would start by saying make yourself into an expert, because then you'll be armed with more information than the clinician has. So get my book, ADHD 2.0, get Sari's book, Radical Guide. You will quickly become more knowledgeable than most professionals. And then you can go in, not, to teach them a lesson, but share with them what you know. And any good professional will be very glad to listen to you and say, oh, that's very interesting. Because all you really need the professional for is to prescribe. You can do the rest, the education, the coaching, the whole treatment plan out of one of our books. So yes, it is very hard to find experienced professionals, but you really don't need one if you're able to teach them. First, learn for yourself from one of our books, and then bring that knowledge to them. And unless they're arrogant and stubborn, and some professionals are, but if you find one who's eager to learn and you give them the information, then you can turn that person into the asset that you need.
I mean, it is hard to get diagnosed. I think you need to ask them, have you treated women or inattentive ADHD or adults with ADHD in general? Because there's a lot of people, millions of people out there who say they experienced with that and they're not, or they view it as some kind of, other kind of human being planet from a different planet. So you need to ask them, are they able to distinguish depression from anxiety, from ADHD? What do they know about executive function? I mean, I would ask them a little bit, just any kind of, informed kind of shopping around like you would for any. And then there's always the question about, do you need neuropsych testing versus someone who understands ADHD and do a different kind of screening and diagnosis? That's always tricky too. I mean, unless you have some other kind of really complicating childhood experiences, like trauma is often, or learning disability. Sometimes there's a lot of tricky things. You want to go to somebody who can help you sort all that out. And often, you don't need that. You don't need to go right ahead and go into a very, very thousands of dollars worth of neuropsych testing. Sometimes you need that. So you just need to, you can start anywhere. If you have a trusted psychiatrist for your child, or you trusted, doctor, or anybody who's trusted, therapist, and look around your area and see who's trusted and knowledgeable. Or
Great.
Online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. There are more resources than ever online. The challenge, of course, is discerning the...
We should, since we're on an Attitude webinar, we should say one of the best resources is Attitude. Attitude's got tremendous resources of articles and professionals. It's just a goldmine. So delve into the archives and resources that Attitude has to provide.
Thank you very much for that. We do work hard, and we're very fortunate to have experts like you to come in and help our readers and our team learn more about ADHD. That's one thing. There is new research constantly that is really pretty mind-blowing. This question has come up a bit. I want to make sure that we get to it. Among adults diagnosed, how do they know if the medication is working?
It's not hard. I mean, you see a difference. Your life gets better. You get more done with less effort. Now, oftentimes the best outcome is in retrospect. In other words, you take the pill in the morning, you think, gee, this isn't doing anything. But by the end of the day, you say, wow, I got a lot more done with less effort. I snapped at fewer people. I forgot fewer things. I didn't need to leave the house 3 times, but before I remembered everything I needed to leave with. I got along with that person I used to think was a jerk. You look back at your day and it was quite different. But you didn't notice subjectively. You didn't feel wired. If you feel wired, that means the dose is too high, like you've had too much coffee. So we don't want that. We just want a change in performance. And oftentimes you don't notice that as it's happening. You just notice when the day is over, you achieved all your goals. You didn't have as many conflicts. You didn't forget as much. You didn't misspeak as often. And another good indicator is you ask other people. You ask your spouse, your boss, your colleague, your children. You say, have you noticed anything? And feedback from others. And that's because we as a group, people with ADD, we're not good self-observers. So we often don't notice what other people absolutely do notice.
And I think it's important.
I had one couple where the man said, this medication isn't doing anything for me. And the wife said, yeah, and if you stop taking it, I'm going to leave you.
Right. So, I think it's good before you start to have a target, pick a few things that are really bothersome so you can target and notice what's happening and how they improve. But it's not a magic pill either. I had one doctor tell my client, okay, go home, take this pill. And when your house is clean, you're cured, which is so bad on so many levels. It's not going to cure. We don't want to cure you. We want to heal you. You're not going to get over who you are. We don't want you to. And so it's just a pill that often for someone can make a huge difference. And then putting all these strategies into place and changing things. But I don't want to act like it's a magic pill. You take the pill and then everything in your life all the ADD is cured and goes away. It's a chronic issue to deal with, but the medication can really give you a foot up and, get your head above water to start even to think about what else you need to do or want to do.
Thank you. That was very helpful. I want to make sure we get to this one too. Someone writes in and asks, what are your recommendations on how to first talk to your elementary school child about their diagnosis to help them understand that they will need different tools and may follow a different path, that their struggles are real, but without doing it in a way that lowers their confidence or makes them feel, excluded or
well, I'll tell you how I do it. I say let's say it's a little boy. I say to him, I have great news for you. You have an amazing brain. In fact, you've got a Ferrari engine for a brain. You've got a race car for a brain. And the kid starts nodding because he can identify with that. Your brain just goes a mile a minute. You've got a runaway brain. Problem is you have bicycle brakes. It's hard for you to control it and stop it. And I say, but don't worry, I'm a brake specialist. So I'll work with you over the years and we'll strengthen those brakes so you'll become a champion, and you're a champion in the making. There is work to do. Yes, you are different. You're not like all the other little boys because you've got a Ferrari and they have, regular engines. But this Ferrari needs some special brakes. And so we need to work together to strengthen those brakes so you can have the control you need to become the champion you have it within you to be. And see, and that doesn't deny there's a problem, but it emphasizes the asset. It emphasizes the race car for a brain. And then there is work to be done. So race car brain with bicycle brakes is an analogy almost every little kid can understand. It also happens to be accurate. And it also lays out a treatment plan.
Yeah. And I don't work with children, but, women always want to know, I don't want my kid to be like me, or what can I tell them? So often if mothers are saying bad things about themselves, and they say, well, I don't know why my daughter with the same problems has such low self-esteem. And, and she's calling herself negative names. So I think you can teach your children so much by accepting your own diagnosis and how we deal with differences, how we value diversity in general, what I do about my struggles. Here's how I get help. And you join with your kid instead of trying to hide it or pretend or worry that it's going to destroy your kid's life, which a lot of women are worried and guilty about when their child gets ADHD if they have it. So joining with your child, if you both have it, it can be very empowering and connecting.
Connecting and liberating. I mean, I've been on national television saying I have this condition. I exult in it. I mean, far from trying to hide it. I feel bad for the people who don't have it. Now, that is not to say, because I hasten to add, I know this can be crippling. I know this can be ruination. So in no way am I being Pollyanna, but I am saying very realistic, because I've lived it myself. I'm 71 years old. That this is, with the right effort, with the right, break specialist, this can lead to a tremendously satisfying, successful life.
Yeah. And I think that all the negative outcomes you hear about, I believe that a lot of those are from not being treated correctly, either with or without diagnosis, the pathologizing, or even after you're diagnosed, the wrong emphasis on, how to live successfully with ADHD.
Yes.
Well, I'm sad to say that we are right at time. I feel like we could have a series of webinars, and one of them solely on this idea of the negative self-talk and how to stop that or control it, because that is so diminishing and defeating for so many, especially women. But I think today's message was absolutely wonderful for ADHD Awareness Month, that you are not defined by your challenges. You have a Ferrari brain, and it's a matter of strengthening those brakes and really embracing who you are. So that's what I took away. I hope everyone else took away positive messages similar to that. And I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Hollowell and Sari Solden. Thank you so much for joining us today in this ADHD Awareness Month webinar. Thank you also to our listeners for joining us. And please make sure you don't miss our future Attitude webinars, our articles and research updates. You can get all of those by signing up for our newsletters at attitudemag.com/newsletters. If you are listening in replay or podcast mode, please visit attitudemag.com and search podcast 375 to access the slides, the webinar replay, and the certificate of attendance. If you support the work we're doing here at Attitude, we encourage you to visit attitudemag.com/subscribe and sign up for Attitude Magazine for your family, or to share with a teacher or a loved one who could benefit from greater ADHD understanding. Thank you again, and happy ADHD Awareness Month, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.
Ever tried reading while jogging, cooking, or even juggling flaming torches? Yeah, it doesn't end well. But with audiobooks.com, you can conquer books without the circus act. Dive into over 450,000 titles, including more than 10,000 free ones. Get hooked on a bestseller, find your next obsession, or finally read that classic you've been avoiding since high school. And here's the inside scoop. Sign up today for a free 30-day trial and snag your first 3 audiobooks on the house. Sign up for your free trial at audiobooks.com/podcastfree today. That's audiobooks.com/podcastfree.